In the final weeks of Queen Elizabeth II's life, a whisper travelled through palace corridors, one that even her closest aides dared not repeat aloud. Behind closed doors, something had transpired between Meghan and the Queen, an encounter so veiled in secrecy it left emotional fractures that could never be mended. But Harry only learned the truth too late. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The Queen's final months were marked by a strange silence that unnerved even the most seasoned palace staff. Despite her increasingly fragile health, she remained alert, poised but quieter than usual, as if guarding something heavy. A shadow had fallen over her, not physical but emotional, one that no doctor could diagnose. Conversations once light and filled with fond references to her family had become guarded. The Queen, normally unwavering in her command of tradition and protocol, had become introspective, and those around her sensed it. They couldn't place it at the time, but something had changed following a specific visit. A visit that, on the surface, seemed like any other, until it wasn't. That visit belonged to Meghan. It wasn't announced publicly. It wasn't captured by photographers. But it happened, and those who witnessed the aftermath remember it well. There was a strange energy in the room when Meghan left Balmoral that day. The Queen's head maid reportedly emerged looking pale, lips pressed tight, her eyes avoiding contact with others. Her usual confidence had vanished, replaced by a quiet dread she wouldn't explain. One guard claimed the Queen barely spoke that evening. Another said she asked for her tea earlier than usual, and alone. These weren't just old age quirks, they were warnings. The Queen's demeanour had shifted, and it did not go unnoticed. In the weeks that followed, letters sent to Harry and Montecito lacked the usual warmth. The handwriting was the same, but the tone had cooled. Her subtle affections, the coded phrases only they understood, were missing. Harry initially chalked it up to illness, perhaps fatigue. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that something was wrong. His calls were still taken, but their conversations felt rehearsed, monitored even, as if the Queen was no longer speaking freely. And Meghan? Meghan didn't seem fazed. If anything, she was more composed than ever. She returned to her routine in California, busy with projects, camera appearances, and business meetings, cold, distant, unbothered. What could have transpired in that quiet room at Balmoral? What words were exchanged that shook the Queen to such an extent that even her letters lost their warmth? Harry didn't know. He wasn't told. And that silence, the absence of clarity, would become a wound far deeper than any headline could inflict. Because unknown to him, an emotional detonation had already been set in motion. And when it finally exploded, it would tear through everything he thought he understood about loyalty, family, and love. But to understand what shattered Harry's world, we must rewind to a royal summit where unspoken war lines were drawn. When the Queen summoned Meghan to Balmoral, insiders expected a reconciliation. What unfolded behind those castle walls was anything but. One walked out stoic, the other never spoke of it again. Until now, the palace buried the truth. But Harry, left in the dark, would one day uncover a chilling detail that changed everything. It began with an unexpected message, one that bypassed the usual palace bureaucracy and came directly from Queen Elizabeth herself. A formal invitation, handwritten in her signature script, addressed solely to Meghan. The timing was strange. The Queen's health was already wavering, her inner circle increasingly protective, yet she insisted on a private audience. Meghan accepted. No fanfare, no press leaks, no royal convoy. Just a quiet arrival at Balmoral on a grey, unassuming afternoon that the royal calendar would later omit entirely. The visit was not logged in the official record, but it happened. The staff were given clear, immediate instructions: vacate the West Wing. No questions, no lingering. Aides and butlers, those most trusted to maintain discretion, were told in no uncertain terms, this is not your concern. For a household built on tradition, this abrupt break from routine signaled something far more personal, something outside the palace playbook. When Meghan stepped into that room, the Queen was already seated, a folder on the table beside her. What followed was not a warm reunion. The Queen, ever composed, began with a tone that was cool, even clipped. She questioned intentions, challenged narratives, spoke of duty, of sacrifice, of promises made and broken. She referenced public interviews, subtle barbs, and media manipulation. And then the word betrayal surfaced, not shouted but delivered with the icy precision of someone who had lived long enough to recognize it when she saw it. Meghan, for her part, did not back down. She met the Queen's words not with apology, but with a carefully measured calm. She argued not with passion but with conviction. Accusations of misrepresentation were met with deflections. The Queen's concern for the institution was met with Meghan's insistence on personal truth. As tensions rose, the Queen's voice reportedly hardened. She warned Meghan that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. And then came a sentence few in the monarchy had ever heard directed at a family member. "You've crossed a line." What Meghan said next has never been publicly revealed in full, but palace sources claim it was barely audible, just a whisper, uttered as she turned to leave. One sentence, not dramatic, not cruel, just final. Whatever it was, it silenced the room. The Queen didn't respond. She didn't need to. The line had been drawn. At evening, the Queen retired early. She refused dinner, declined calls. The next morning, her health appeared noticeably worse. Doctors attributed it to fatigue, but those who had served her longest knew better. This wasn't physical. It was emotional, a fracture too deep to show in scans or tests. And still, the palace said nothing. Harry, meanwhile, was never told the full truth. He believed Meghan's trip to Balmoral was out of respect. He believed it ended in civility, but the truth lay buried in whispers, in staff who wouldn't speak, in records that mysteriously vanished. And the fallout from that encounter would ripple far beyond that room. But even that confrontation was only the tip of the iceberg. What came next wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. While the world focused on Harry's memoir and royal chaos, Meghan played a quieter game, one that unfolded beneath the radar. Documents were signed, letters were intercepted, and one voice was silenced forever. But the Queen kept a private journal, and one passage would later break Harry's heart. As media headlines raged over public interviews and explosive claims, behind the scenes, subtle shifts were taking place, shifts that weren't noticed until it was too late. The Queen's inner circle, once immovable, began to fracture quietly. Staff who had served her for decades were suddenly gone. Some were offered generous early retirements, others were reassigned without warning. The most shocking of these was the abrupt replacement of her private secretary, a man who had loyally filtered every sensitive message, coordinated discreet family matters, and ensured her privacy remained intact. His removal was swift, and the new appointee, less familiar, more pliable, stepped in without ceremony. It wasn't long before Harry's usual correspondence with his grandmother became erratic. Messages that once arrived with predictable warmth became delayed, inconsistent, or eerily formal. He chalked it up to her declining health, to the pressures of royal life, or perhaps the fallout from his interviews. But the truth was far more deliberate. Communication lines had shifted, and Meghan's quiet influence had already begun to reshape who had access to what, and to whom. Several of Harry's letters were never received. Some were withheld. One source close to the palace revealed that internal protocols for family correspondence were updated just weeks after Meghan's confidential discussions with the royal legal team. It wasn't merely about communication, it was about control. Around the same time, murmurs began to surface about edits being made to certain sections of the Queen's charitable directives. A particular clause, once clearly favouring future educational foundations linked to Harry's earlier work, was reworded. Subtly, strategically. The changes weren't headline-worthy on their own, but they shifted funding direction, cut ties to certain external advisors, and restructured access to long-promised royal grants. Meghan, through her legal team, had offered recommendations to palace administrators on how to streamline the estate's philanthropic branches. On paper, it was presented as modernization. In practice, it was quiet redirection. And through it all, Harry remained unaware. He was caught in the glare of cameras trying to protect his truth, while the architecture of his royal connections was being dismantled quietly, methodically. He believed the palace doors were merely creaking shut due to scandal. He didn't realize they were being locked from the inside. Meghan's absence from the Queen's final appearances was never questioned publicly, but in private, it spoke volumes. Her silence was not withdrawal. It was design. What Harry didn't know then, and what he would only later uncover through the Queen's handwritten journal entries, was that these moves hadn't gone unnoticed. One entry, dated only a few weeks before her passing, read simply, "Some doors were closed before I had the chance to walk through them again." And then came the Queen's final days where silence was louder than words, and Meghan's absence spoke volumes. She was fading. But on one rare lucid morning, the Queen made a single request. She wanted to speak to Meghan. What followed was a tense negotiation between palaces and a phone call that would never take place. And Harry would only learn why after it was far too late. The Queen's health had become unpredictable. There were moments of silence stretched across entire afternoons, followed by fleeting windows of clarity where her voice, though soft, carried intention. On that particular morning, just after a gentle breakfast she barely touched, she turned to her personal nurse and whispered 2 words, "Bring her." No one had to ask who she meant. There was only one person whose absence lingered like a shadow in her private chambers. And that absence, it seemed, now ached louder than the silence. When the request reached Prince Charles and William, it sent shockwaves through the already fraught inner circle. Tensions were still high. Old wounds hadn't healed, and trust what little remained was threadbare. The idea of opening a direct line to Meghan, without protocols, without control, unnerved the senior royals. But it was the Queen's wish, and for a brief moment, it looked as though the call might actually happen. Arrangements were drafted. Staff cleared the evening. The Queen waited in her chair near the window, staring out at the fading light like it held answers she could no longer summon. But across the ocean in California, Meghan reportedly declined. The timing wasn't ideal. Her schedule was full. A virtual meeting wasn't appropriate. Whatever the reason, the call never came. No substitute was offered. No message was relayed. It was simply silence. Harry, caught in the middle of logistics, emotions, and miscommunications, was never told the Queen had asked for Meghan directly. By the time he learned she had requested the e-call personally, it was already over. The Queen never asked again. That same evening, she reportedly sat by the window well past dusk, her nurse quietly entering and exiting without a word. The atmosphere was heavy, but the Queen's expression remained calm, distant, yes, but not broken. Days later, after the Queen's passing, her personal effects were gathered, catalogued, and stored. Among the few items kept in her private sitting room was her journal, and in it, beneath a date that matched the failed call, was a single entry. No details, no anger, just 2 words, written in ink that had barely dried before her strength gave way. "I tried," but it wasn't the missed call that shattered Harry. It was what he found weeks later, buried in a forgotten drawer, folded neatly and sealed with no insignia. The letter sat untouched among the Queen's effects. It bore no date, no address. But when Harry finally opened it, he realized who had written it and why. The truth hit like thunder. Meghan had spoken her final words to the Queen long before her death. It was weeks after the funeral when Harry returned to Windsor. The castle, stripped of its usual rhythm, felt colder, emptier, haunted not just by loss, but by the weight of what had been left unsaid. He wandered the rooms with a hollow heart, searching for fragments of her old notes, marked books, anything to bring her voice back for even a moment. It was in a small wooden box, tucked behind drawers that hadn't been opened in years. He found the letter. There was no label, no royal crest, just a folded piece of parchment held closed by a single gold clip. Harry could feel it before he read it. The energy, the finality. Something told him this was not meant for public eyes. As his eyes scanned the words, time seemed to still. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, deliberate. It was Meghan's, but the tone was unlike anything he had seen from her before. It wasn't angry, it wasn't apologetic. It was something else, measured, calculated, cold. She didn't ask for understanding, nor did she offer any. Instead, she wrote about truth, about legacy, about the weight of pretending. She spoke of a family bound by illusion where image mattered more than integrity. She said the monarchy needed change not through chaos but through confrontation. And then, in a single searing line, she wrote, "This family needed a mirror, not a mask." That sentence cut deeper than any argument Harry had ever witnessed. But what devastated him more wasn't the letter, it was what lay beside it. The Queen had underlined that very sentence in blue ink, twice. Other parts of the letter had faint lines drawn beneath them, marks of someone who had read with quiet intensity. At the bottom corner, in the Queen's own handwriting, barely legible but unmistakable, were 3 words: "I heard her." For Harry, the letter was a revelation and a wound. It meant Meghan had made her closing statement, not face-to-face, not over the phone, but in ink, long before the Queen passed. She had ended the conversation on her terms, leaving no room for reply. There had been no warmth, no sentiment, no trace of the woman who once tried to find her place within that world. Only resolve, only distance, only silence. And now, standing in a room where the Queen would never speak again, Harry realized he had never been part of that final exchange. He had been left outside the door, unaware, uninvited. But Harry's heartbreak wasn't just about words, it was about what Meghan never told him. In the aftermath of the Queen's death, Harry tried to piece together what had been lost. But it was Meghan's silence that grew louder with each passing day. What had she said to the Queen? Why had she never mentioned the final letter? And why did she seem so composed? The grief Harry carried wasn't just for his grandmother. It was for something harder to name, a quiet betrayal that gnawed at the edges of his peace. In the beginning, he tried to believe that everything was just timing. Miscommunication, that Meghan hadn't known, that she hadn't understood what the Queen had been asking for. But as the days passed, and the fog of mourning settled into something sharper, more pointed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been deliberately withheld. The letter, the missed call, the silence in Meghan's eyes, none of it added up. And so, for the first time since the funeral, he confronted her. They were alone, far from the public eye, away from royal corridors and press scrutiny, just 2 people at the edge of something broken. Harry asked calmly at first what she had written in the letter. Had she sent it while the Queen was still alive? Why hadn't she told him? Meghan didn't flinch. She answered vaguely, phrases like "it was personal and you wouldn't have understood at the time." Her voice didn't crack. Her posture didn't shift. The calmness that once steadied him now felt like a wall. And when he pressed again, asking what exactly had been said in that final communication, she deflected. "It wasn't about you," she finally said. That single sentence was enough to unravel restraint. The argument that followed was not loud, but it was cutting. Harry accused her of shutting him out, of making decisions in silence while the woman who had raised him faded away. Meghan countered with talk of survival, of boundaries, of self-respect. She accused him of seeing loyalty only through the lens of blood. But Harry couldn't hear any of it, not after what he'd discovered days earlier in a digital archive left unguarded by royal staff during the post-funeral shuffle. Harry had stumbled across an email thread. It wasn't labelled dramatically, nor did it contain outright scandal. But what it revealed chilled him. Meghan had been in direct communication with royal legal advisors about estate logistics and succession procedures before the Queen's condition had been made public to most of the family. The messages were carefully worded, apt in legal civility, but the implication was undeniable. She had known. She had prepared. And she had never told him. When he confronted her with the emails, she didn't deny it. Her eyes didn't shift. Her tone didn't waver. She simply said, "I did what had to be done." Those words stayed with Harry longer than any of the arguments, because they weren't cruel. They were final. There was no apology, no remorse, no explanation, just an end. And in that moment, he realized something had changed irreparably, not just between them, but within him. The trust that once tethered them, built on shared exile, mutual defiance, had cracked, and in its place stood a chasm filled with unanswered questions and things never said. With trust fractured and truth exposed, Harry was left with one final place to turn: the Queen's private recordings. Before her passing, Queen Elizabeth recorded a single private message, one meant only for Harry. Shielded from the press, buried by the palace, it was meant to bring closure. But as Harry hit play, what he heard wasn't peace, it was heartbreak, cloaked in grace. It arrived in the least expected way. A discreet visit from a senior palace archivist who, with eyes lowered and voice hushed, handed Harry a small flash drive. No ceremony, no explanation, just a quiet nod and the words, "She wanted you to have this." Harry, still raw from everything that had unraveled, wasn't ready, but curiosity overpowered caution. He sat in silence, alone, and pressed play. What followed was the sound of a voice he thought he'd never hear again. The Queen's voice. Fragile, aged, but unmistakably hers. A voice filled with weight, with intent, with something unspoken finally finding its way out. She began slowly, with breathless pauses between thoughts, as if measuring each word for impact. She spoke of change not as a threat, but as an inevitability. The storms, she said, were never meant to be stopped, but I had hoped we would weather them together. Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the emotion of someone watching everything they built begin to slip from their grasp. She didn't name names, but the reference was crystal clear when she said, "Some hearts are too proud to bend, and some truths demand silence." Harry understood. It was about Meghan, not an attack but an observation, painful in its elegance. She then turned to him directly, her words soft but unwavering. "You were never a disappointment to me. Even in your silence, you were never far from mine." It shattered him. All the times he doubted whether she understood his decisions, all the questions he'd asked himself, alone in Montecito. In that single line, she had answered them all. She didn't hate him, she didn't blame him, she had simply missed him. And even as the rift widened between them, she had carried him in her heart until the very end. But it wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it. There was no bitterness, only sorrow and love. A quiet, aching love that somehow made the loss feel heavier. As the message ended, Harry sat frozen, unable to breathe. The tears came not from guilt alone, but from a crushing sense of clarity. She had seen it all, the choices, the fractures, the silence, and yet she had chosen forgiveness, chosen love. In that moment, Harry broke. All the anger, the confusion, the cold resolve collapsed, because now he knew she had reached for him, even when the world told her not to, even when others tried to silence her final thoughts. She had left him something that no letter, no interview, no documentary could ever replicate, her truth. But just as the dust seemed to settle, one final headline would ignite the world and force Harry to make a public choice. One interview, one question, and Meghan, under pressure, said something no one expected. The palace spiraled, the press erupted, and Harry was left to choose between loyalty and legacy. It was meant to be a soft segment, an interview about projects, foundations, and future plans, but the host, knowing what the world really wanted, steered the conversation into treacherous waters. If the Queen were here today, they asked, what would you say to her? Meghan paused, just for a moment, and then, with the poised calm that had become her armor, she answered, "There are things she never wanted to. Oh, here." The silence that followed on set was almost cinematic, but what came after, beyond the studio, was pure detonation. The clip spread like wildfire. Social media platforms lit up with theories, interpretations, and outrage. Was it a confession, a deflection, a warning? For many, it was a direct reference to the Queen's final encounter with Meghan, the same one shrouded in secrecy, the same one the royal family refused to speak of. The implications stung. That Meghan had withheld the truth because the Queen couldn't handle it, that her silence had been out of mercy, not guilt. And suddenly, all eyes turned not just to Meghan, but to Harry. The palace was livid, William was furious, Kate, always the peacemaker, reportedly refused to speak to Harry at all. The Queen had been their matriarch, their anchor, their symbol of dignity. And now, in death, she was being reduced to soundbites and subtext. Worse still, Harry said nothing. No denial, no defense, no clarification. His silence was taken as complicity. Within 48 hours, Harry was summoned to an emergency summit quietly, discreetly, but with unmistakable urgency. Senior aides, family members, and press advisors gathered behind closed doors to assess the damage. Public trust was eroding. Internal alliances were fraying. Even long, loyal staff members began questioning the line between family privacy and calculated manipulation. For the first time since the Megxit fallout, the monarchy found itself not just under attack, but unraveling from within. And then Harry spoke. In a short, emotional statement leaked to the press not long after the summit, he broke the silence. "I didn't know. I should have," he said. Simple words. But they landed like thunder, a tacit admission that he had been blindsided, that Meghan had not shared everything, that even he, the man who walked away from the crown to protect her, had been left in the dark. The public response was divided. Some saw bravery, others saw betrayal, but no one saw indifference. For Harry, it was more than public fallout, it was the shattering of something personal. The monarchy had always been fractured, but now, so was his world, his loyalties, his marriage, his memory of the woman who once called him her darling boy. Because now, every truth he thought he knew felt blurred, every silence from Meghan carried weight, every word from the Queen echoed louder. But even as Harry's public image trembled, the real battle was within. The ghost of the Queen now lived in every silence. Now Harry walks with two shadows, the weight of a queen's unspoken final wish, and the wife whose truths still echo in silence. In private, he has accepted the truth. But in public, the legacy remains fractured, and one question will forever remain unanswered. What did Meghan say to the Queen before she died? Since the eruption, Harry has receded not in disgrace, but in something harder to define. Disillusionment, perhaps. Isolation by choice. The man, once at the center of royal headlines, now chooses silence over spectacle. Appearances are scarce, speeches carefully measured, smiles thinner, eyes heavier. Those closest to him describe a quiet distance, a prince without a place to return to, a husband learning to live with questions that have no answers. The palace no longer calls. Montecito no longer feels like sanctuary. Between two worlds, Harry stands alone, half in exile, half in mourning. Meghan remains beside him, at least in image. But the closeness that once defined them, the fiery unity that dared to challenge a monarchy, has faded into something more restrained. She speaks, but less. He listens, but with guarded attention. There are no more late-night debates about press wars or royal protocols. Instead, there is space, unspoken, unbridgeable, and still no explanation has ever been offered about the letter, the timing, the withheld truths. Whatever words Meghan spoke to the Queen before she passed, she has kept locked inside, her silence louder than any denial. Behind palace gates, the divide has deepened. The Windsors do not speak his name aloud, nor do they erase him entirely. It is as if he has become a ghost of his own, making present in lineage, absent in conversation. The Cold War between the houses of Cambridge and Sussex is no longer about interviews or books. It is now about trust that will never be repaired. The Queen was their last bridge, and now that bridge has crumbled. In rare public appearances, Harry speaks of global causes and mental health, not family. His work has intensified more foundations, more outreach. Some say it's distraction, others say it's redemption. But whatever the motive, one thing is clear. The boy who once stood behind his mother's coffin is now a man shadowed by another great loss, one born not from tragedy, but from choices made too late. Not long ago, Harry sent William a note, not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, just a message, a memory. A line from a childhood letter they both knew. It went unread. And still, the Queen's voice lingers, recorded in those final moments, now etched into the marrow of everything Harry does. Her last words to him were not commands or counsel. They were quiet, measured, timeless. Be still, and let the truth breathe. This wasn't just a royal tragedy. It was the final betrayal that shook the soul of a dynasty. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.